Yes, so part of the idea when Clint Ramos and I and Jenny Gersten came into these positions and were really thinking about the future of Encores, one thing that felt really exciting was to think about the founding mission of New York City Center, this building, and wonder how that might essentially hold hands with the Encores mission a bit. So City Center was founded by Mayor LaGuardia as a people's theater. It is supposed to be a palace of the people. It is one of the designated New York City cultural centers that is really supposed to be very much a place of welcome. And I think part of the idea, we still will do the hidden gems, reviving shows that are not frequently revived. We will continue to do that, and essentially 2 of the 3 Encore shows will be that. The idea behind this was that once a year, we might do a show really through the lens of community engagement that was purposefully a show that was among the best known shows that actually we could really use as a wide invitation. Because I think for a lot of people, if it's your very first musical, high button shoes may not be the right entry point. Just that it's part of growing to love the form. And I think for many people, the initial way into the form is something like Into the Woods. And we knew, particularly for this show, because the show has an intergenerational element. Thematically, one of the questions of the show is, how do we tell stories across generations, right? What do we tell our children? What sense do we make of the world? And particularly, how do we talk to them about the things that are so hard in life? Despair. For those of you, I'm going to spoil one thing about the show that I think if any of you have seen it, not even 4 times, you may know, is that the Act 1 of Into the Woods essentially takes all these fairy tale characters and leads them on a journey, but essentially they end up in a happily ever after place at the end of Act 1. And in Act 2, there is more complexity that happens, and they have a giant that they have to deal with that is threatening the very survival of humanity, and they have to essentially find a way as a community to come together around that and to get over their differences. And in Act 1, everybody is in some ways really about I wish, right? The thing that they want. I wish for a prince, I wish for wealth, I wish for a cow, whatever it is. And in Act 2, they have to find a way as a community to come together to face an obstacle that is bigger than any of them, right? And it felt like that was both an opportunity for our engagement and education departments to do a lot of work around the show, inviting people in. But then also we have a community engagement piece of the performance itself. And that has been somewhat limited, but in terms of what we have been able to do, COVID, as you can imagine, is a little bit tricky in terms of having large-scale participatory work. But we do have a chorus of about 70 community members who perform in the finale of this show. And it's a combination of middle schoolers and senior citizens that we have been working with and doing workshops around the show. And one of the things that was really special is that a lot of them, both the seniors and the middle schoolers, had done their own production of Into the Woods. So the show itself was one of the ways that we were able to connect, which was really delightful. I should say also that Into the Woods, there's something, Musical Theater International, MTI, which licenses musicals to be performed in schools and in community theaters across the country and the world. Into the Woods was the very first show that they made into a junior version of the show. They did Into the Woods Junior, which was an hour-long version of the musical that could be performed in schools. And Sondheim and Lapine were the first artists to say, yes, go ahead and let's do that with our musical. And I think probably because they did it and it went well, a lot of other people said yes too. And Into the Woods was also the show that they used to pilot their senior series. So Into the Woods Senior is a 1-hour version of the show meant to be performed in senior centers and retirement communities and nursing homes. And so again, that was one of the ways that we connected with people around the show.
Right. And I think if any of you did Into the Woods when you were in high school, you probably just did Act 1.
Yes. Yes. Well, yes, some of our community members had like a really shocking moment when they found out about things that happened in Act 2. Yeah.
Everybody dies, okay. But Leo, can you talk about the community building aspect? Because you pioneered the Public Works initiative at the Public Theater, which every year, for the past few years at the Delacorte Theater for Shakespeare in the Park, Lear would bring in 200 community members to do a Shakespeare production. And so can you talk about incorporating some of that ethos into your work here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, working with community engaged work is my heartbeat and my joy. You know, I grew up in Louisiana, from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and yes, and I think, you know, for me, because I didn't grow up around a lot of, quote, professional theater, the type of theater that was part of my life was Mardi Gras and football games and church and all these things that have participation in them. And also, I'll point out about all three of those things that those are all very intergenerational. You know, those are all things that people pretty much of every age, being part of Mardi Gras, being part of a football game or church, you know. And so that just is sort of what feels very full and beautiful and natural to me on some level. So yes, I have been working in a community engaged practice for about 20 years, and about 10 years ago founded Public Works at the Public Theater. And the idea behind that, in addition to the kind of most visible part of the program, which is once a year doing a 200-person musical at the Delacorte, the most recent one I directed for Public Works was we did Hercules with Disney, 200-person production. Yes, thank you, yes. But that's the visible part, the part that you may not be is not as immediately visible, though I think I even saw a couple of folks here tonight that know this part of it very well. But it's really about the relationships that are happening in sort of the other 11 months of the year. The foundation of Public Works is really long-term relationships with community partner organizations, and really letting the relationships both with individuals and the partner organization itself develop over many years. So, you know, folks in my life through Public Works, I've been walking with a lot of those folks for 9 years of life. And for me, that is about the sense that theater at its core is always about relationships. It's always relational, and I think, yeah, for me, being able to do works of art that marry, you know, Broadway performers and folks of all ages from the community is really, to me, I just find that work radiant and joyful, and it's what I love to do. And I think there's no question that every place that I do it, I adapted some, and I wanted to find for City Center, and this is very much still in process, figuring out what is a version of that work that can be authentic here and that really makes sense. As you all know, I think you may know, the Encores rehearsal process is very short. It's less than 2 weeks. And that in itself is an obstacle for community-based work, right? That's like not how we usually do things. And we've had also, this is a union house, and so that has its own set of everything that goes along with it. You know, we've been figuring out, right now the community has a meal together as part of the thing, but because of COVID, we have to do it in like rotating groups of 10 that are in the outdoors where there's, you know, it's just like, there's so many layers, and I feel like really the community engagement of Into the Woods to me feels like just, you know, peeking through the curtain of what would be possible here. It's just the beginning, but it did feel like, because it's in the DNA of this institution, it's written into the bylaws of what this building is supposed to be, it felt really exciting to find a way to let that kind of burst through the doors.
I'll ask you one more question before I open up to the room to ask any questions you all have about Into the Woods. But I said I've seen the show 4 times in my time in New York City, and this is one of the most diverse cast I've seen in this production, which is funny because it's fairy tale characters, so why shouldn't they be diverse?
Yes.
But can you talk about the process of casting and also like working backstage and how you ensured that same, like what was on stage was also reflected off stage?
Yeah, well, that is really part not just of this one show, not just of Into the Woods, but really thinking about Encores and City Center as a whole. You know, the season that we've done, we did the Tap Dance Kid, which Kenny Leon directed, and Lydia Diamond wrote the adaptation. Jared Grimes did the choreography. And then we did The Life with a new adaptation by Billy Porter, and then Into the Woods, which we're not doing any new adaptation. There's no changes to the orchestration or the book or anything. But part of the intent as a whole is, you know, to make work that reflects the world, that reflects the city that we're in, and also to have, I think, to have, as you said, both the backstage roles, and I think one of the things that has really come to light during the pandemic is how many parts of the industry have been historically exclusive, and that's very true, even of some of the, you know, jobs that are, again, less visible, like some of the design areas, right, are areas where there just has not been diversity in, you know, certainly in the Broadway community. And again, that's not something specific to the theater. That's because of American history. That's because of the whole context of the culture. So but it still is something very real, and that without really intentional steps isn't going to change. And so, you know, Clint Ramos and Adriana Lea and I have been working very closely together from the beginning, and we have Camille Brown and Robert O'Hara and Issa Davis are our advisors, and we've had just many conversations about what it means to try to have the values be consistent, and what it means to know that it's not like in 1 year everything is going to be perfect. We can't do everything within 12 months, but we did want to really intentionally move toward change and center anti-racism as a value, and really work to have that be true on every area. And so, you know, really part of that is about mentorship also. So all of the designers this season have had a mentorship role with younger designers, for example. And our intent is that those designers, the younger designers who are being mentored, that the intent is that those are people that we will hire in the future. It's not just that they sort of remain in an assistant position or an associate position forever, but there is an actual, they're here, you know, learning the particulars of this fast process, in part so that they're set up to do it successfully themselves.
I'm told we can't do questions because we're out of time, because you all have to go get to your seats. So,
or have one more cupcake.
Or have one more cupcake. So please enjoy the cupcake.